The newsfeed continues now. Thanks for staying on. After 20 days of no power cuts, Eskom has once again taken us back to stage 6 load shedding, or at least it started at stage 3. And in the middle of the night, early morning, we heard that stage 6 would be implemented. What has happened? What led us to this when we believed that stage 6 will be a thing of the past? Well, let's unpack that. We are joined now in studio by Mthunzi Luthuli, energy expert, to give us a little bit more. You've been listening to that briefing by the minister. He says at least it's not sabotage. It's a technical problem. I don't know whether that should make us feel any confidence. But why are we here? Something happened.
Yeah. Okay. You know, the minister and Eskom earlier today gave an explanation, which is a technical explanation. And but there's another view out there, okay? And maybe let me start with that view and then come to the explanation that was given by the minister and Eskom. The first view is that, you know, this whole problem of load shedding is about the political economics of the industry, okay? Private sector players are being brought in, and in order to justify their entry into the industry, Eskom has to be shown to be an organization that is failing to provide electricity or at least consistent power for the country. And if Eskom is failing, then you can justify bringing in private players. What people are saying is, you remember 21 days ago, immediately after NERSA had denied Eskom the huge 30% increase that it wanted, we immediately, the very next day, got load shedding. But it lasted for about 24 hours and then it was called off. And some people say, well, what was happening is that somebody reminded Eskom that, hey, we're going to have the meeting of the G20 foreign ministers, so you can't do this because it's going to create a bad image of the country. Yeah. And now it's happening a day after the end of the meeting of the G20 foreign ministers. Right. So, and some people say that's just a conspiracy theory.
No, that's precisely what the minister would say. He says, well, I'm giving you an explanation as to why it happened, so that you know, but get rid of conspiracies and not try and make up stories that are not there.
Yeah, but if people understand the economics of this industry, there is a lot of validity in that argument. Anyway, coming back to what Eskom said, you know, Eskom said that, you know, we understand it. You have to be a technical person to understand it. What they say is they were starting up Unit 1 at Camden. Yeah. And when they were starting up the unit, so what happens is Unit 1 supplies auxiliary systems for itself, and it supplies auxiliary systems for Unit 3 and Unit 5. Yeah. That's the way that they plan, you know, you get the odd units, 1, 3, and 5, and then you get the even units, 2, 4, and 6 for the 6-pack stations. So they were starting up Unit 1, and the transformer that supplies power back to the auxiliary systems of Units 1, 2, and 3 tripped on overload, okay? And obviously when it trips, then there's no power to the auxiliary systems of the other units, and then those units would then obviously then trip as well. So, so that's what happened. It had a cascading effect. Yeah. Yeah. That also then affected Medupi Unit 5, right, because that tripped on what is called under frequency. Okay. Under frequency happens when the load is higher than the system is able to supply, or the unit is able to supply, and then it starts rotating at a speed that is less than synchronous speed. Okay. and that causes under frequency, and then the unit trips
now,
on under frequency.
The CEO says, look, well, to deal with these issues, one of the approaches would be re-engineering the plant. Others are saying, hey, leave that thing alone. Re-engineering is not going to help you. Just support the engineers, maintain the thing, it will work.
But when the CEO says there's some re-engineering that needs to be done, he's right. And in fact, I am surprised that this thing happened at all. You know, because normally what you would have on critical or critical systems, you would have redundancy in terms of their power supplies, so that if one supply doesn't work, you can the other supply can be used, or it can quickly kick in.
Yeah.
Now, I was surprised when he said that the other units depend on on Unit 1 for their auxiliary power supply.
They don't have alternative auxiliary power supply.
Yeah, what happens if Unit 1 is out?
Yeah.
You know, so that's a big question that I have in my mind. But then, if that is the case, then obviously you do need to re-engineer, redesign the whole system so that it's got an auxiliary or a redundant power supply, such that if something goes wrong with Unit 1, you still have a power
supply to the
auxiliary systems of the other.
Let's talk about this then, the generation recovery plan. Is it on track?
I am of the view that that generation recovery plan is not going well. And the main reason I say this is, firstly, we remain on the edge. Even when there is no load shedding, we are on the edge. That's the first problem. The second one is that the UCLF is refusing to come down on a significant and permanent basis, if you know what I mean.
What is the UCLF?
The UCLF is the unplanned capacity loss factor.
Yeah.
That's basically the capacity that is lying idle because of breakdowns. Okay? Last year, and for a period of about 3 years before the end of last year, that UCLF was sitting at around 15,000. Sometimes it would go up to even 16,000 megawatts.
Yeah. I remember at some point when we were doing well, the minister had dropped it. It was sitting at 14,000.
Yeah.
It even went to 13,000. And we said we were doing well.
Yes, it did get to, and in fact, the reason why we haven't had load shedding for the last 10 months or so is because that UCLF had dropped to about 13,000. At some point, I think it hit 12,700 megawatts, which to us indicated that we're moving in the right direction, that the generation recovery plan was working. But what's happened now is that the UCLF is back at 14,000 megawatts. So
and what does that tell us? Does it tell us there's been a lack of performance as far as maintenance is concerned, as others are calling it? Look at your maintenance basis. That is a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah. It means that the generation recovery plan is not working accordingly. Because basically, what you're trying to do with that plan is to recover all of those units so that, you refurbish them, you make sure that they are reliable, and you can bring them back online with a high confidence that, they will not trip, unexpectedly.
Yeah.
So they're failing to do that, which means that the plan is not working.
Overall grid performance?
And by the way, UCLF generally, given Eskom's overall installed capacity, should be sitting at around 5,000 megawatts. It's at 14,000. That's almost 3 times of what it should be.
Yeah.
That's very, very bad.
Sitting at about 5,000, we should be comfortable. Even unit trips here, unit trips there, it would not have such a big impact.
Exactly.
Overall grid performance?
Overall grid performance, the grid remains tight. Slight disturbances because we are just meeting demand, and we don't have sufficient reserve capacity so that if 1 or 2 units or 3 units trip, that you still have the reserve capacity to come in and replace those units that have tripped. So we don't have sufficient reserve capacity. This thing also, by the way, impacts economic growth.
Yeah.
Because investors are not going to come into the country when we don't have enough electricity.
Yeah.
Even when you don't have load shedding, they check, how much capacity. If I'm going to be building a factory that requires a lot of electricity, I want to make sure that there's going to be sufficient, stable power for me to be able to do my manufacturing. So they do check, and if they see that there isn't sufficient reserve capacity, they'll go to another country.
Yeah. Well, you speak of the political currency. That is the undertone of what we are seeing here, where we've just come out of a failed budget presentation.
Yeah.
And the last time you and I would have spoken about these things, there was a lot of emphasis on capital allocation, particularly for the work that needs to be done to bring Eskom to where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Is Eskom getting the necessary capital? Are they being allocated what they need to carry out the work?
Yeah. I have not checked in this, what do I call it, aborted budget. Yeah.
It's a draft now, I suppose.
A draft, yeah.
While they go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. So I did not check how much had been allocated, but you'll remember it may be that in this budget, they didn't allocate any further funds because...
From what I'm hearing, no funds were given to SOEs.
because they allocated something like 275 billion. But that was going to be paid to Eskom over a period of 3 years. And I think we're only in the second year now. So, that 375 billion, they get tranches over a period of 3 years. So I don't think that they would have given them an additional allocation.
But those tranches, are they beginning to have the necessary impact?
The minister did say that those tranches have made a difference, in terms of aiding Eskom's operations and allowing Eskom to spend more money on maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be. Again, we are going on the line of conspiracies here to say it could be used as leverage to say, hey, without that 2%, things like Eskom can't be fixed because that's where we need to get the money.
Yeah, that's possible. But you're talking about the 2% VAT increase.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible. But I think what is happening there is Eskom is actually using the tariffs to get what it wants. So all of these requests for 36% increase, and then when NERSA says we don't grant you, then the next day we have load shedding. My reading of the situation is that you give us what we want. If you don't, you'll suffer because we'll introduce load shedding. And in fact, it's not just us who are saying this. The CFO of Eskom did say that. He did allude to this before NERSA made the announcement. He did say that, look, if we don't get the increases that we want, this might leave us with no option but to continue implementing load shedding because we won't have money to fix the units. But it's nonsense.
Fixing the units, some of your colleagues are optimistic that this is a problem that can be resolved by the end of the week. This auxiliary power and whatever else that is causing the trip is something that can be fixed by the end of the week. Your assessment?
Yes, if that is actually the problem, definitely it can be fixed before the end of the week.
Mthunzi Luthuli, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming in. Energy expert Mthunzi Luthuli, and some analysis of what is, of of course, happening that has led us to stage 6 load shedding. The Newsfeed PM continues shortly. Stay with us.